My name is Christy Craig, and I'm the publisher at Hidden Timber Books. I want to welcome you all to another one of our small press author reading series events. This is kind of the new normal for book events. So I try to keep it as close as possible to if we were in a bookstore. So I hope you feel comfortable asking questions, and if you have any tech troubles seeing or hearing, you can send me a note in the chat box. But if the screen glitches or freezes, just, you know, I like to pretend that that's like the mic shutting out on the podium, you know, right in the middle of a very important quote or question. So thank you for your patience if that happens. The next thing I like to do at these readings recently is also introduce you to another book or another small press in the meantime. And just because this is a great platform to gather people from all over and to share word of other small presses, what they're doing, and other authors that are out there. And I spoke with Melanie and with Lyndsey today about showing a video real quickly about a book that's coming out. There's a small press called Penny Candy Books, and they're based in Oklahoma and North Carolina. And they have a Kickstarter campaign right now for a book that's called 13 Ways of Looking at a Black Boy. And it's a great children's book. It looks wonderful. And I wanted to show you the Kickstarter website, but then when I saw the video, I thought this would be really a great way to just open up the reading. So I'm going to share my screen with you and show that video real quickly.
Hello, good people. My name is Tony Medina. I am from the Bronx in Harlem, and I also teach creative writing at Howard University, the legendary. I am an author of books for young folks, and I have a couple of things I want to share with you today. The first thing is I want to remind you that you have to wear your mask, practice social distancing, wash your hands on a regular basis, use your hand sanitizer. The second thing I want to do is to introduce you to this beautiful book of mine called 13 Ways of Looking at a Black Boy that was published by Penny Candy Books. The thing about 13 Ways of Looking at a Black Boy is that it celebrates Black boys and boyhood. You get to experience them in their everyday lives, doing everyday things. You get a glimpse into them. It was inspired by the Black Lives Matter movement, where there was a lot of situations of police brutality and violence against people of color. And I wanted to show an aspect of Black boyhood that normally doesn't get depicted in the media or in books. And that's just being a regular kid. And you have 13 artists bringing them to life. Let me give you a little example of what I'm talking about. You have this incredible piece right here, one of my favorite paintings in the book by R. Gregory Christie. This is my favorite, one of my favorites too, and the poem I really like called Little Mr. May. Let me share that. Let's share that with you. Little Mr. May. My granny made me this suit so I could look nice for God. She's always at church. Her Bible's older than me. It's heavier than can be. And that was a poem. I guess when I was writing it, I was thinking about my childhood and my grandmother who raised me. When I was thinking about the book, I was thinking about a poem by Langston Hughes called I Too Sing America. In the last couple of stanzas or so, it says, tomorrow I'll be at the table when company comes. Nobody will dare say to me, eat in the kitchen then. Besides, they'll see how beautiful I am and be ashamed.
Okay. Thanks for letting me share that. Thanks, Melanie, for letting me take a few minutes of your spotlight here. It's just a really cool book. Penny Candy Books does some great things, so please be sure to check them out, and I'll drop a link at the end of the reading so that you can go to that. Yes, I will definitely drop a link for the Kickstarter. And now I've also asked Lyndsey Ellis to co-host the reading today with me. Lyndsey is coming from the St. Louis area, and she's here to just host a discussion and reading with Melanie. And I, at Hidden Timber Books, I'm honored that I get to publish Lyndsey's debut novel in May of 2021 called Bone Broth. So it's another fun opportunity for you to get a chance to meet her as well as we talk about this great book and a wonderful author, Melanie S. Hatter. So Lyndsey, I will hand the baton to you.
Thanks, Christy, and thank you for sharing that video. Hi, everybody. Happy Sunday. Thank you for joining us. I know we're all excited to hear Melanie read. I just want to say this book, Malawi's Sisters, is just a beautiful, beautiful book. It's so moving. If you haven't read it yet, please do and pick it up. It's phenomenal. It's a phenomenal work. Just about the unraveling of a family after this horrific, tragedy that has taken place, and it just has so much heart. It's written with so much heart and so much character depth. I'm really just moved by it. I'm sure you guys have been too. And again, if you haven't read it, please take the time to read it. I'm just going to read Melanie's bio and then hand it to her, and then we can listen. So Melanie S. Hatter is the author of The Color of My Soul. She was the winner of the 2011 Washington Writers Publishing House Fiction Prize, and Let No One Weep for Me, Stories of Love and Loss, a short story collection. She is a participating author in the Penn Faulkner Writers in Schools program in Washington, D.C., and serves on the board of the Zora Neale Hurston Richard Wright Foundation. And then she actually won the inaugural Kimbilio Fiction Prize for this book, Malawi's Sisters. So without further ado, here's Melanie.
Thank you, Lyndsey and Christy. Really appreciate this opportunity to share. As some of you may or may not know, it is James Baldwin's birthday today. So I'm kind of honored to be participating in a reading on his day. There we go, Greg, thank you. So I wanted to just share a quote from James Baldwin. When you're writing, you're trying to find out something which you don't know. The whole language of writing for me is finding out what you don't want to know, what you don't want to find out, but something forces you to anyway. So happy birthday, James Baldwin. I read that earlier today, and it spoke to me because, as I had mentioned to Christy, I'm working on a new project right now, and I'm sort of in the throes of the very beginning, very sort of exciting part of just creating and getting to know my characters. I don't quite know where the story is going yet. I'm still sort of figuring it out, and it's there's a lot of sort of excitement and fun around that, and just that sense of trying to figure out, life. I mean, it's these, it's Black characters dealing with Black issues. It doesn't involve protests, at least I don't think it's going to. It's not about the pandemic, but we'll see where it goes. So Malawi's Sisters, I selected because there are protests happening. We just had a protest in DC, and Seattle, of course, has been, or Portland rather, has been in the news a lot lately. So I'm going to take a piece from the book that is a protest. And for anyone who's not familiar with the book, it's looking at how this family deals with the death of a sister daughter and the aftermath of that. And it does explore a little bit of really what's happening today with the headlines, the Black Lives Matter movement. And so the two surviving sisters are Kenya and Ghana, and this is from Kenya's perspective. Kenya rummaged in her purse for a tissue and pressed it firmly on her forefinger, trying to stop the bleeding, trying to be discreet. Chewing the skin until it bled was a habit she had never understood and struggled to stop. She folded over the tissue and dabbed the clean side on her temple. The temperature was hotter than she'd expected, and she knew the back of her dress was soaked with perspiration. She looked around, hoping no one was paying attention to her, despite sitting on a stage before a mass of people. She hoped she still appeared cute and stylish. Signs bobbed and swayed above the crowd. Justice for Malawi, make an arrest, Black Lives Matter, Black women matter. Something about that last one stung. Until now, she hadn't seen any headlines about Black women being killed by cops or vigilantes. She was sure her sister wasn't the first and wondered if the news media didn't consider the deaths of Black women as newsworthy enough. Black women did matter. They were mothers and daughters and sisters. Ghana was graceful as she stepped to the microphone, and this surprised Kenya. Her sister was eloquent, strong, passionate, all the things Kenya wished to be. Ghana was free. Free to be anything she wanted. In high school and college, Kenya panicked whenever she got a B. The fact that Ghana never got her bachelor's degree dumbfounded Kenya, who would never have gotten away with not graduating. But then, look at her life. She got paid by the hour and probably had no health insurance. There was no security in that kind of life. Speeches and more speeches. Then everyone would march to the courthouse to demand the arrest of Jeffrey Davis, who apparently hadn't been seen since the shooting. Too many of us are dying, Ghana said, her voice echoing through the speakers into the air. My sister will not die in vain. We must demand change. The crowd burst into applause, and Kenya nudged her daughter into a sitting position and clapped her hands with a sudden burst of energy. The balled up bloody tissue fell to her feet, and a breeze shifted it toward the edge of the stage, causing Kenya to panic. She watched it teeter like a red-spotted carnation, afraid of it being blown into the audience. Then her father stood up, drawing her back into the moment, and she looked at Ghana, who glanced back, perhaps seeking reassurance or checking to make sure everyone was still awake. And Kenya stood up to applaud, forgetting the tissue. Her sister was a superstar. They marched slowly. This was Kenya's first protest march. Some linked arms, making her feel awkward. She avoided linking arms by walking between Charlene and Junior. This wasn't the march in Selma across the Pettus Bridge, after all, yet a weight settled in her stomach. A woman approached. Older, perhaps her mother's age, wearing a bright green blouse and black pants. Arms outstretched, she took Kenya's hands, forcing Kenya to stop walking. The crowd nudged past. I lost my brother, the woman said. Her small eyes were full of tears yet to fall. He was shot by the police. They just don't care about us. Just don't care. Kenya wasn't sure how to respond. I'm so sorry, she said, squeezing the woman's hands. She didn't understand why so many African Americans were being shot, and why Malawi. Ghana was right. This was bigger than the Walker family, bigger than the loss and their pain. The woman said, "You're not alone," then pulled away, and Kenya gripped Junior and Charlene's hands. As the crowd swallowed the woman, Kenya tightened her hold on her children and spied Ghana's hair up ahead. I'm going to stop there.
Thank you, Melanie.
Yeah.
It was a cool reading. I love all the details that you included, even the bloody Kleenex, like a carnation, and just keeping us in that moment with her. That makes it a more powerful read, I think, as a reader. Just, we're not going to just breeze through. It makes us slow down as a reader so that we feel everything that she's feeling as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's hard sometimes, I think, to sort of put into words what this book means, especially because of what's happening today. This was something that I had written, I had conceived of a number of years ago. I was inspired by the Renisha McBride, who had been shot and killed in Michigan. And she was a 19-year-old Black girl who late at night her car broke down. She went to get help from a nearby house, and the white man inside shot her. No questions asked. And it was it was 2013 when this happened, and it was around a time when so many people were getting shot. So many Black people were getting shot and killed, mostly by police, but also by these sort of vigilantes. And it was, what was it, about a year, I think, after Trayvon Martin. And the fact that we are still today dealing with these same attitudes, same hatred, and violence it's frightening, it's saddening, it's sickening. I only hope that readers can read the book and try to grasp that these headlines that we see, that these names that get flashed up are more than just headlines. They're more than just a name across a screen. They are human beings who had families, and these families are struggling and trying to deal with this tragedy. Just as sort of as a nation, we're kind of going through that. But I wanted to bring people into just how a family can suffer and what they experience after a tragedy that, I mean, we all deal with loss. There's no one, I think, in the world who hasn't experienced loss in some way, but in a way that is so just purely out of hatred towards someone because of the color of their skin, I think leaves a deeper stain on their psyche.
Yeah, I think that resonated with just a lot of people, and I'm glad you chose that part to read from too, Melanie. It definitely kept me in the moment, and it's just a really compelling scene, and kind of like what you're saying of just about victims, of just this brutality, whether it's by police or vigilantes or whoever, just strictly off the color of their skin, and the fact that we're seeing it again. I mean, Renisha McBride, and then the parallels, drawing parallels with Breonna Taylor, and just everybody that's just involved in this, and just you showing like the human side, from the family's perspective, and what they go through. And like you said, they're not just a headline. It's like these are actual people who actually suffer.
Right.
From the consequences, and keep suffering even when it's not, when it's done being a headline, and if the world ends up trying to move on to the next story, and it's like these people are still suffering.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. And I mean, I was wondering because in the book you brought up so many dynamics, like the family dynamics, the siblings, it's just so many different relationships and so many issues and topics and surprises you brought up. And I guess without giving it away, I saw that you had mentioned once in an interview about a book reviewer had like taken issue, I guess, with the cop perspective and the Blue Lives Matter and that whole thing that you kind of brought to the storyline, which I thought was great because it's like you're showing every side, you're showing different perspectives. And, you know, it is complex like that. It's not like neatly wrapped into in a box that we can understand. A lot of this is, you know, just coming up. So I was just wondering if you had gotten any other feedback or insight from people, whether it had to do with loved ones of law enforcement or people who were loved ones of victims of police brutality, or just anyone else that came up with that to you.
Not from the police perspective, actually. I've just had that one particular person who sort of they just didn't like, I think, that I was including that perspective. But my ex-husband was a police officer, and so I sort of I'm sort of in that place of having very mixed feelings about the police, and there's so much coming out that makes me so angry, just along with so many other folks. But it's a world that I was part of for a number of years. And so, I have some part of perspective. And I understand, that there are police officers. I mean, my ex-husband was a wonderful man. We just weren't good at being husband and wife, but he was a wonderful man and a good police officer. And so part of it, I think, was my sort of exploring around when you have a police officer. Now, my ex-husband is a Black man, but I wanted to look at the perspective of a white police officer who, in his mind and his heart, feels that he's a good officer, that he's out there trying to do good in the world. And I was sort of curious about his perspective, and also maybe more so wanted Ghana really to be challenged by that, because she's a character that is very kind of easy breezy, and feels like she's very kind of down with the people and very open. But I wanted something to kind of challenge her perspective. And here she is, sort of falling in love with this guy who represents the quote unquote enemy. And so there was that sort of element of the relationship that I was sort of curious to explore that as well.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, I just want to read a couple of the comments from the chat in case you're not able to see them, Melanie. Amanda is just saying the way it dawns on Kendra that she's become part of a bigger story is so wonderful. And TM responds that I'm glad you focused on a Black woman's murder, as Breonna Taylor wasn't really in the news, not headlined national news, until she was bookended by the murder of 2 Black men and Gregory's agreeing. Yeah. And all of that is so important and baffling, and just I want to let you address those if you'd like to. And I just want to say I appreciate that you're putting different perspectives in the book too, because I have family as well who are who've been in the police force, and it's really difficult to reconcile things. It really is. And yeah, that's a challenge. So it's nice to know that piece is in your book as well.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't I did have someone, I went to a book club, and I had someone sort of say, well, I feel like you wanted the readers to like this character, Ryan. And I said, well, I don't write characters with the mind that readers should like them. What I try to do is write characters who are real and authentic. They have wonderful aspects and they have bad aspects. You know, we're all good and bad. And so I try to bring that into the characters, this idea that I try not to write in, you know, in sort of tropes or in, you know, this is going to be the good character and that they are, that's what they represent. I don't really think of my characters in that way. I try to think of them as whole, so that they're not always going to do things that, you know, you're going to cheer for. And sometimes you might think, oh, I don't know about that. I'm not sure I like that so much. But that's what makes people complicated. And that's what I think is sort of interesting about trying to, you know, write characters and looking at sort of the whole aspect of them. And I've sort of blahed and forgotten exactly what the question was.
Just comments, and just comments in the chat box about you know, bringing the Black women matter as well.
Yes.
But Amanda does have a question for you, and Amanda, if you'd like to ask directly, you certainly can do that.
Sure. The sisters really rang true to me, the way that they interacted and how different they were, but they were all in the same family. Can you speak a little bit about how you arrived at that sometimes uneasy dynamic?
Yeah, you know, I have gotten this question before because I'm an only child. And so I didn't really sort of grow up, you know, with that dynamic, but I've seen it in a number of sort of families that I've interacted with and friends, and sort of watched that a little bit. And you know, there's, you know, I mean, I guess I just sort of created these characters based on things that I'd witnessed, and again, tried to not create stereotypes, you know, with the, you know, the older child and the middle child, etc. But there are sort of elements with, you know, Kenya, who is sort of the older sister and the more responsible and the one who kind of, you know, sort of takes charge. And I've witnessed that, I think, enough that, you know, while in some respects it's a little stereotypical, but at the same time there's truth there as well. But yeah, I just I sort of had fun with exploring that, and there's probably that aspect of intrigue around it because it's not my world. And you know, as Baldwin was sort of saying, you know, we write to explore and to kind of ask questions and try to figure out the truth there. And so for me, it's, you know, with these characters, what is it like to be a sister, to have this, you know, sisterhood, these three sisters, and then to lose one, and how, you know, how do you navigate that, especially when the surviving sisters are not necessarily that close. You know, how do you deal with, again, the reality that we're not all one thing, we're not all good or all bad. And so you have these characters, or, you know, these human beings who are shot down, killed in whatever way. And there is a tendency, especially with Black men, but Black women as well, they dig up sort of the negative things. Well, you know, the police were arresting him because he was, you know, doing something bad. And if you look at his life, he was, you know, a druggie, or he was this, or he was that. And we want to sort of create this negative atmosphere around it. sure, there are folks out there that are doing sort of, you know, unseemly things, but that doesn't mean that they deserve to be, you know, murdered on the street. It doesn't mean that because they stole something once that it defines who they are. And so with Malawi, not to give away the story for those who haven't read it yet, but you know, we find out some things about her that is a little questionable. And so there is this sort of sense of, okay, so this is my sister who, you know, I wasn't super close with, but she's my sister and I love her. And now I've discovered this about her. How do I feel knowing that she's been killed in such a way that she's kind of now become this martyr? What is that emotional journey? And I really wanted to explore that with Kenya specifically. So yeah, I mean, it's just, again, trying to sort of step into those shoes and explore what is sisterhood. I hope that answers your question.
Yep.
Great. Thanks, Amanda. Thanks for that question. And Gregory, you said you had a question? Go ahead.
Yes, I wanted to make a comment first. I was really, the one thing that drew me when I first heard you read, like, I guess an earlier section of the book, and then as I've, you know, gotten deeper into it, the focus on what happens afterwards and the family, this is something that's almost impossible to get from the news. So just even having that perspective, I think is, you know, really valuable. And it sort of made me think, I have two sons, they're grown up. And as a parent, I had all the normal fears, I still do, that any kids, you know, that any parents have. And yet, as I've had to absorb all these headlines, and I have, you know, I have a number of Black friends who have kids, and I realize that many Black women are affected by this, but it seems like the focus has really been on boys and young men. And, you know, so I have a very close friend who has 3 boys, and it's unimaginable to me to have to go around and worry, are they going to have an accident on their bike? Are they going to cross the street? Are they going to get sick? And then also to have to think that every day they're at risk from, you know, some, not necessarily random, but from some kind of act of violence. So I feel like we need more stories like this to really show the impact and the aftermath. So I really appreciated that. And my question is kind of, it's not specifically about the book, but it's something you alluded to when you were talking about it, and the fact that the, I don't want to say victim, but the woman who was shot and killed is a woman. And I'm wondering, I have no data to suggest that men are more at risk than women if they're Black. You know, as you point out, there are not, you know, if there are more women than we know about, there's some reason for that focus, I mean, which I can't understand. But do you have any insight or any thoughts about why is it that somehow the focus is so much on Black men? And even though there are at least some, but, you know, a handful of fairly now well-known cases of Black women dying in police custody or being, you know, shot by what you call vigilantes. You know, do you have any idea why that is? Is it sort of the normal misogyny, sexism of the culture, or something else? I mean, I'm just curious what you think.
Yeah, it could be some of that. I don't know, but what I am aware of is that young girls in schools are more policed than even boys. They are subject to, you know, dropping out of school because of sexism and racism in much larger numbers. Why the media is more focused on the boys, I don't know. I don't want to put anyone on the spot, but I know that there is a journalist in the audience who might even be able to speak to that. But, you know, I also think that there's this element of, and I think, at least I hope that we're starting to move away from this now, but there was certainly this element of, the thug, the dangerous Black man. And so when we're seeing them, dying on the street, we're able to then sort of say, well, they were doing wrong. Like, this is Black men, they're thugs, they're thieves, they're, whatever it is. And, I think there's a societal sort of shift, at least I hope, that we're sort of moving away from that now. But I felt like in years past that the emphasis on that negative element and trying to almost excuse why the police, did what they did, well, Black men. But I don't know, I don't know if there's, some other, thing happening there. Oh, there's a comment from Tracy. So Tracy says, women are victimized as much as men. The violence is often sexual and against the most vulnerable and marginalized. Black sex workers, including trans women, many of whom have unstable housing. Yeah. And that's what I was saying. Like, it's even like it starts in school, like it starts in high school. These, young, especially poor women are victimized. They have, police in the schools, and, they're victimizing the women, actually more than the boys. Yeah.
Yeah, and to speak to your point, Melanie, just about how, now there's wrenches constantly being thrown in the narrative, for lack of a better expression. And you're saying, like, we're all impacted by the negative stereotypes, specifically of Black men. But for men and women, Breonna Taylor was an EMT worker. You had, even after that, Elijah McClain, he was playing his violins for kittens, rescue kittens.
Yeah.
So, it's just things like that. And it's just like, okay, it's not just, you can't rely on the stereotype anymore.
No, not at all. And they can't, and that's the thing. With Breonna Taylor.
Thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, there's nothing that they can't portray her as a victim who was kind of asking for it, because there's just, there's no narrative around her that can put her in this negative light at all. And so I think what we're able to do with that is really start to say, let's really take a serious look at the police, because it's not the victims, it's not the Black men, it's not the Black women. There's a problem with policing in this country, and that's where I feel like there is a little bit of a shift that's starting to happen, that we are focusing on that. I don't know that it's moving quite the way I would have liked to have seen it move. We seem to have backed off of that a little bit. And, some of the jurisdictions had this, we're going to defund the police and we're looking at budgets. And I don't see the budgets going down for the police departments, not the way that message came up initially.
There's just one thing that I wanted to mention about, I hate to go there, because we know that's all obvious, it's a challenge now, but that's the pandemic. But I'm just wondering, in this work, and we know how it kind of complicates things for the Black community specific, and just any community that's marginalized. But I'm just wondering, just as a writer and a reader, activist in your own right, how does this, like, in modern times, influence your work or your work ethic, even as a writer?
Lyndsey, I'm sorry. The last part of that kind of faded out a little bit. Can you repeat
Yeah,
the last part of your
I can
question?
repeat it. I was just saying, I was just wondering with everything going on and with how COVID-19, the pandemic is kind of complicating everything, as if we need any more complications, particularly in marginalized communities. But I'm just wondering if you could speak to it all, if how the pandemic and everything surrounding it has, I guess, affected or impacted your life as your writing life, or just your life as a writer, and if at all. I don't know if it has.
Yes. Yes. Just real quick, I know I've seen Mary's hand go up a couple times, so I'm going to answer this and then we'll get to Mary. Yeah, I think initially there was this sort of this just overwhelming feeling and an inability to really focus enough on writing. And I've heard that a lot from other writers. But I seem to have found my stride a little bit, and there's a stillness that's happening right now. There's not the same kind of busyness, because things are shut down in many instances. I'm not traveling out to events. I'm not going various places and doing the kinds of things that I was. And so I'm finding that I've opened up some space for me to be able to kind of reflect and think and write. And I have to say that, the introvert in me has kind of been loving this period of time. I've said this a couple times, that the transition to recluse for me could happen really easily, I've discovered. So, folks out there, just watch me, because, if I'm starting to disappear a little bit, just sort of hook me back into society, because I'm kind of happy just being at home, writing, thinking, and, doing my thing. So yeah, I've been quite productive, certainly in the last month, for sure. Oh. Mary. I think you're still on. Yeah, there you go.
Thank you, Melanie. I'm a little bit, I've been learning a lot of technical stuff during my pandemic period. But first I wanted to thank you for the book. I come from a family of all sisters, and who've gone through a tragedy that had nothing to do with anything racial, but we recognize, I shared your book, and we recognize you did so well with describing grief and how it is like a rock in a pond, and that how it affects people differently. So that there was that real human connection that we all found with your book right there. Thank you for that. And you started with that wonderful quote by Baldwin, and I wanted to ask you, what did writing the book force you to know? That an uncomfortable truth that you might have discovered in the course of your, and that's kind of putting you on the spot, but anything that you hadn't seen, something that you hadn't seen coming. And I almost kind of felt it when you were talking about the police officer, perhaps, but if there was anything else.
Yeah, oh gosh. I mean, I think there were sort of a number of things, but how to sort of distill it all down. Yeah, it's such a hard question for me to answer, because I just feel like there's sort of these little sort of moments of revelation that kind of happen, throughout the entire journey of writing a book. And I always find it hard to sort of say, oh yeah, with this book I learned, this or that. But part of the book was really sitting with these tragedies, really sitting with loss. And, I read a lot of pieces because sadly there were a lot of killings. And so there was a lot of things that I could read about. And I think there was just this sense of sadness around it. And I think that it's those feelings are still so very heavy, I think. And I was looking at the Walker family and what they're dealing with, but it's the Black community, right, as a whole. Like, and I think that that's part of what we're really going through right now, is this national, international feeling of, I don't want to say loss per se, but this heavy weight of centuries, 4 centuries of struggle and pain and distress that the community has experienced. And I think sort of went through some of that in writing the book and feeling that. And you know, and it's not gone, and it's just it's that continuation of sadness that here we are again and again and again.
Just hearing you describe that, I understand something that I hadn't thought about your book, that the family is like a microcosm of really the larger community that breaks down when you have a tragedy. And that especially when I'm thinking of the situation with the mother, I won't give any spoilers, but I mean, it seems very extreme, only if you haven't lived in a community that embraces a lot of variety of people within it, like a family that can have middle class folks and people who have drug issues, or people who are incarcerated, and you know, a whole human community within a single American family, that you appreciate you know, what you're doing with the character of the mother. Thank you.
It's very easy to judge, and so many people many people said, you know, about the mother, like, oh no, that's that would never happen, or but unless you've been in those sort of dire, you know, you don't know how you're going to react to things. And there are actually studies that have been done on people who react in way, like if you ask them directly, you know, what they would do in a certain situation, and they'll sit there and they'll say, you know, because they're rational at that point, and they're like, you know, I would do it the absolute right way. And then they get into that situation and their mind just goes. And then afterwards they sort of look back and they're like, whoa, I didn't even think that I was capable of doing something like that. So yeah, people do strange things when they're in crisis.
Thank you.
Thank you.
To speak to Mary's point too, and your point just about no judgment, and the way you just invoke empathy in there, it just is amazing how you did that. Even, I mean, you mentioned the mother, and again, without giving it away, even Kenya, like, I think she came to a lot of realizations with what was going on with her, even personally. So that was much appreciated. Like you said, you just don't know what you would do until you're on the other side.
Right.
Well, thank you, Mary. That was great discussion. Thanks, Lyndsey. We're getting close to about 5 minutes before 3, and we don't have to end at 3 at all. We can go a little bit over, which is fine with me. I did want to ask you one question, Melanie, just about your book kind of really got its jump start through the Combilio fiction and being a Combilio fellow. And we were talking earlier about literature that gives voice and different perspective to those who've either been silenced or ignored, or those who've been portrayed in negative stereotypes. And I wondered if you might talk a little bit, just briefly, about Combilio, what they do, and you know, what your experience was as a fellow.
Actually, I wasn't a fellow.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah. But Cambilio creates community for Black writers. They have and Lyndsey, who is actually a Cambilio fellow, can probably speak more to this, but it's that opportunity, right, to bring Black writers together in a space that is safe for them. I've served on the board of the Hurston Wright Foundation, and we sort of create that same kind of opportunity to be able to, give Black writers that chance to express themselves without being questioned, right? And part of it comes out of being in writing programs where oftentimes, you may be the only Black person in the room, in the workshop. It's very rare to go to, certainly an exclusive, writing experience and be, in the majority. So these are spaces for, Black writers to be able to focus in on their writing and not have someone else come and start asking questions about culture. You're in a room where everyone knows the culture. And it's the same, I mean, if you have a room full of, white writers, they're not asking each other questions about the culture because they all know it. And so it's that opportunity for Black writers to be in that kind of a space where, I remember being in a workshop, and if I remember rightly, I was the only person of color. And we had split up and we were giving feedback on our work. And one of my characters had blushed and her cheeks had gotten red. And no joke, this woman argued with me that Black people couldn't possibly, their cheeks couldn't become red. Like, that just wasn't a thing. And I'm sitting there and I'm looking at her like, really? Like, out of everything that I've written, that's what you're going to talk about right now. And so, when people sort of say, well, why do Black people have to have their own writing groups? That's why, because we do sort of face these challenges where we're not able to really focus on craft, but have to explain ourselves. And so Cambilio, Hurston Wright Foundation, those are opportunities for us to be able to kind of do that. And the Hurston Wright Foundation actually sort of takes it a little bit of a step further because they have a legacy awards ceremony every year where they, give an award out to fiction, nonfiction, and poets. And then also celebrate, renowned Black writers, Black creators in the community. So it's an opportunity for us to kind of celebrate what we contribute to, the literary canon.
Very cool.
It's probably way more than you were expecting.
No, I don't know much about it, so I did want to hear more about it. And yeah, that's very cool. I don't know, Lyndsey, do you want to share anything about your experience as a fellow?
Oh, yeah. And Mary probably has to this too. I don't want to put you on the spot, Mary, but Mary's a video fellow too. But I totally agree with Melanie. I have to say it was an experience, or it is an experience like no other. Just, like Melanie was saying, you don't have to explain yourself. I feel like you constantly have. It's kind of like what I guess the late Toni Morrison was saying, like you can focus on your work and your craft without having to worry about the white gaze. So to me, that's like, it's like you don't have to worry about just constantly explaining culture, dialogue, things that we might understand as a community. You can just delve right into the work. So yeah, it's very important, and just to have that community around you, and just that encouragement and that uplifting community it's just amazing. And I did the in DC, the Hurston Wright. I was at a workshop in, I think, 2011. So I'm glad you brought that up too, Melanie. Great experience there.
Awesome. And, it's 3 o'clock, so I want to make sure everybody has a chance to ask any other questions or make any other comments where you can buy it. I know, Melanie, I put a link for Loyalty Books. And are they located in your area? Is that where they are?
Yes, Loyalty Books, they have 2 locations in the DC area, one in the Petworth section of DC, and then also in Silver Spring, Maryland, where I live, and they're like a mile from my house. They are Black woman owned, and yeah, it's a pretty cool little store. So a little plug for my local bookstore.
Well, I will drop those links in the chat box again one more time before we close. And Lyndsey, is there anything else that you would like to add before we close?
No, that's pretty much it. I am just curious. So, Melanie, as a writer, I don't know, do you have a specific regimen, or do you write every day, or is it something like when you just feel compelled by a specific topic to explore? Is it something that you just, do you have to find inspiration to do it, or is it something that is like part of your regular schedule?
It kind of depends on what I'm working on, sort of where I am in the project, and where I am in my regular life as well. I work, my day job is with a nonprofit that serves children experiencing homelessness. So I have that responsibility, during the day. And so finding that time to write can be a huge challenge. And when if I'm in sort of the editing phase, sort of the 5 millionth draft, and editing of a project, I tend to slow down a little bit and be a little less enthusiastic. Right now, because I'm working on something new, I'm very sort of inspired, and I find that I'm constantly writing. I'm sort of scribbling notes. I'm waking up early in the morning and putting down, even if it's just a couple sentences, but it's sort of constantly there. And it's that moment of, do I just take a week off right now so I can focus on it, or, but I don't generally have like I don't sort of sit down at a certain time every day and write. I've never really worked that way. I tend to be a little more easy breezy with it, and just kind of go with, if I have, 30 minutes here or a couple hours there, or if I have a whole weekend that I can just focus in. And, sometimes I don't write at all during a week. And, I don't beat myself up for it, because, that's life. I'm not always going to be 100% focused in. That's okay. It doesn't mean that I'm not going to get anything on the page. Right now, I'm going at 120%, because it's there. Next week, who knows? I might just sit and, binge watch NCIS, for the entire week, and that's okay.
Perfect. Well, I hope you enjoy that free writing process of just, finding and exploring that material. I know everybody's excited to see and hear about your next book. And thank you all for all of your comments and questions. Melanie, be sure and check the chat box out. There's some great information there for you, some great comments for you. And thank you, Lyndsey, for co-hosting with me. I appreciate you all being here on a Sunday afternoon. We have lots more events coming down the line. So if you stop by hiddentimberbooks.com, we've got another one in a couple of weeks. And, you know, they run all the way through October. So I hope to see you all online again. Go check out Melanie's book at Loyalty Books and check out her website. And check out Penny Candy Books Kickstarter. And thanks again. Have a great
Thank you, everyone. It's been wonderful. Thank you so much.